Never trust a smile that hides too many teeth. Never trust a voice that sweetens every lie. Never trust silence that feels heavy with intention. Never trust laughter that follows your pain. Never trust praise that comes too quickly. Never trust eyes that wander when you speak. Never trust hands that hold you only when you're winning. Never trust promises made in desperation. Never trust comfort that comes with a cost. Never trust words without action. Never trust perfection. It's often painted over cracks. Never trust those who need to be the hero. Never trust urgency that pressures the heart. Never trust flattery that feeds the ego. Never trust those who listen only to respond. Never trust peace that comes from surrendering your truth. Never trust company that grows quiet in your struggle. Never trust tears that come too easily for others' stories, but never your own. Never trust footsteps that follow too closely. Never trust the warmth of someone who turns cold under pressure. Never trust advice without empathy. Never trust those who remember your mistakes better than your name. Never trust hands that build only to control. Never trust voices that rise when questioned. Never trust kindness that performs. Never trust silence that echoes with guilt. Never trust a crowd that cheers too quickly. Never trust those who love the idea of you, but not your depth. Never trust forgiveness that comes with a receipt. Never trust those who constantly compare. Never trust stillness in the eyes during chaos. Never trust anyone who benefits from your doubt. Never trust time that only rushes you forward. Never trust company that dims your fire. Never trust certainty that lacks curiosity. Never trust explanations that erase your feelings. Never trust space that doesn't allow you to grow. Never trust apologies that include blame. Never trust voices that tremble when speaking truth. Never trust dreams that require self-betrayal. Never trust paths that demand you walk alone forever. Never trust those who disappear during the storm. Never trust hunger that devours more than it needs. Never trust those who punish vulnerability. Never trust softness used to deceive. Never trust beauty that blinds you to cruelty. Never trust comfort that chains you. Never trust memories that hurt more than they teach. Never trust those who wait for you to fall. Never trust celebrations that exclude your story. Never trust shadows pretending to be light. Never trust those who rewrite your past to make themselves look better. Never trust love that needs to be earned. Never trust quiet that feels like warning. Never trust those who cannot hold your silence. Never trust connection built on convenience. Never trust peace offered to end your resistance. Never trust love that competes with your freedom. Never trust endings that never explain themselves. Never trust affection that leaves bruises. Never trust the calm that follows manipulation. Never trust those who remind you of your place. Never trust warmth that fades with the season. Never trust those who laugh when you cry. Never trust the ones who remember only when it suits them. Never trust charm that demands your silence. Never trust a welcome that feels like a trap. Never trust voices that drown your own. Never trust shoulders that vanish when you're heavy. Never trust those who fear your independence. Never trust the hand that feeds you while tying you down. Never trust motivation rooted in guilt. Never trust the ones who steal your words. Never trust silence that erases your truth. Never trust approval that comes at the price of your soul. Never trust loyalty born of fear. Never trust the calm that feels like surrender. Never trust those who never question themselves. Never trust those who never apologize. Never trust love that only shows up at night. Never trust pride that refuses softness. Never trust urgency that ignores your pace. Never trust logic that discards emotion. Never trust smiles that appear only when you shrink. Never trust people who enjoy breaking what they don't understand. Never trust kindness used to control. Never trust comfort that silences growth. Never trust security that demands obedience. Never trust peace built on silence. Never trust people who can't celebrate your joy. Never trust those who resent your healing. Never trust light that burns more than it warms. Never trust anyone who needs you to be small. Never trust hands that heal just to harm again. Never trust anyone who hides behind your mistakes. Never trust the voice that tells you you're too much. Never trust the echo of doubt when your heart is clear. Never trust the silence that follows your truth. Never trust the love that breaks your spirit. Never trust anything that costs your soul.